Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Shinnery, and we're here from Cornell Cooperative Extension in Rensselaer County for another one of our Lunch in the Garden webinars. We're glad to have you all here today on this beautiful sunny day. Luckily, it's a little chilly out, so people are coming in and warming up and maybe having some lunch, and that's why we're doing our webinars, which we've been doing since the old days of the pandemic. So we're glad to have you here. We're going to have one more webinar next week, next Wednesday, which is going to be May 7th at noon. It's going to be on trees and why trees are valuable. And if you're on our root concerns list for emails, we will be sending out a link for that one. So you can join us for the last special Zoom probably of the season on trees next Wednesday. But today we have one of our master gardeners here, Denise Maurer, and Denise is a fantastic master gardener. She does lots of different programs for us. She's interested in orchids, houseplants, landscaping, design, all sorts of aspects of gardening and horticulture. And she does many, many talks and is a really great asset to our program. And today, Denise is going to be talking to us about container gardening. So we're all getting the itch to get out there and get started. So Denise, hopefully the connection will keep going, and we're glad to have you here today. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, David, and thank you for that great introduction. If, as we were testing, we were finding a few blips with the Wi-Fi, and we tried to connect a different way. If I freeze, David, let me know, and I'll turn my camera off again. But I
Okay.
went through a lot of trouble to put my makeup on today, so I'd like people to see me if they like to.
You're looking good.
All right. Okay, we're going to talk about contain your garden, which I think is perfectly timed for this time of the year because the garden centers are stocked with all sorts of wonderful flowers and ornamentals and whatnot. And it always gets me and my creative juices really excited to get out there because making containers is one of the most creative things you can do because they're just little touches. What I call maximum results in minimum spaces. So, without further ado, we'll move on. I'm going to minimize this. Okay. Um, I'm going to talk first a little bit about container garden benefits. They're, of course, ideal for small spaces. Containers work well on small patios and terraces and whatnot. They also provide protection from wildlife because they're not always out right there on the ground where the wildlife are walking through. It's also an opportunity to contain invasive plants. I have some invasive plants that I actually like mint and chameleon plant. And those are all wonderful, but they can spread like wildfire if you don't contain them. So just having them in a pot is wonderful for a wonderful application for containers. Also, for those that have some needs for adaptation in gardening, such as those with disabilities or mobility, the containers are easier to reach because they give you some height. Low maintenance because it's a very controlled environment and it's on a smaller scale than say an acre plot of gardens. So that makes it just easier to take care of. It also gives you the opportunity to have some edibles close by, maybe right outside your kitchen door. In fact, I'm going to be talking about edible landscaping tomorrow at the Nassau Library, which is another creative way to garden. And it gives you some creative focal points around your garden. And just like with the spring and a breath of fresh air out there, a container can always make you smile. And not to mention it's time saving. So, one of the things we begin with in container gardening is containers. So, if you've got an old viola around, maybe you want to adapt it into a container. You can use anything for a container, such as window boxes, raised beds, ornamental pots, hypertufa, repurposed objects like this viola. Basically anything that's going to hold drainage. And here you can see a beautiful window box. Railings are another place that you can decorate with containers because they've come up with a lot of clever ways to attach window boxes to railings. And whether it be a small pot or a window box, it just is another way to elevate your containers, which make them more accessible to work with. And if you're someone like me who wants to protect your knees, I have many family members who have knee replacements, and I don't want to go there. So raised and elevated garden beds are another place where you can say that it is like container gardening because it is a smaller enclosed space. There's been a lot of adaptive pieces invented to help those that are living in smaller spaces like apartments and condos and whatnot, where you can actually grow your ornamentals and even your edibles right there on your small patio. And here's just a couple of examples of them. They're out there and readily available. And by gardening at this height, you're not only saving your knees, but you're saving your back as well. Hypertufa is a special container. It is made with concrete and peat moss and perlite. And while it is lighter than cement, it's still a heavy container, but it means you can leave your container outside all year round. It is very adaptive in the colder weather. But hypertufas tend to be on the smaller side, so they're great for one or two plants or maybe small succulents, which we'll get into the design of your containers in a little bit. Other containers are hanging gardens. Wonderful if you happen to have a porch or even a mounted bracket somewhere on the exterior of your home. You can use them in multiples and really create this wonderful botanical look right on your porch. They do require grooming. They don't always look as pretty as that ball that you see on the upper left-hand side, but that's what you're going to see when you go to the nursery. They're all just inviting you and perfectly shaped and whatnot. But with a little bit of attendance by you through deadheading and shaping, you can maintain this. I should also mention feeding too, because that's really important. But you can maintain that that look, that shape, as it continues to grow for you. And, there does come a time, maybe you forgot to water, you didn't get to the water as quickly as you wanted to, and your container flops and it doesn't rebound the way that it was before you let it dry out. Or maybe it's just gotten gangly because you haven't been grooming it all along. So I say sometimes just do a reset. And that means cutting back the blossoms and everything. And what that does is it sends a message to the plant system to focus on the roots and focus on getting strong and healthy, and it will rebound just like new for you in just a very short order of time. This is one of my favorite things to do, using repurposed objects to make containers. Here on the left side, you can see a collection of repurposed galvanized steel products, and from an old wash bin to the old, does anybody remember using those little galvanized tubs for swimming pools when you were little? We couldn't swim too far, but we could certainly get wet and have fun and throw a lot of water around. Anyway, this is your opportunity to be resourceful. And again, you provide drainage for your plants and something unique, and you will be the talk of the town. Of course, there's lots of beautiful ornamental pots out there, from urns to the concrete urns to metal glazed pottery. You name it, it is out there. So don't hesitate to consider these easy containers to create your container gardens. And then there's the plain and simple, just terracotta pots. I love terracotta because it has so much character as it continues to age. A little bit of green, a little bit of white on it. It just just sings to me. So anyway, consider terracotta pots in different sizes and whatnot. Plastic only if it's attractive. I use plastic as a liner in my containers. I don't use them to display a container because what's a thing of beauty if it's in a utilitarian pot? And then there's resin out there. Many new products have been invented using resin. They come in larger sizes and they're lightweight and easy to pour around. And they also are very colorful and a lot of fun to plan your containers around your flowers that you'll be planting. So things that you need to consider, as I stated earlier, containers must have drainage. So if you're using a container that does not have drainage, you either have to create that by drilling some holes in the bottom of the pot, or another way to do that is to put some stones at the base of your container. I even use pine cones because I happen to have a good supply of those these days. But just something so that the soil is not totally at the bottom of your container. That water can drain into and around the small stones or the pine cones. Or I even use old pots, small pots, and anything else if I need drainage. The other is you need to consider where you're going to site your containers because you do want to be sure to provide them 6 hours of sun unless you've chosen plants that are specifically intended for shade. Otherwise, most flowering plants and most annuals, we'll be talking a lot about annuals, do require a lot of sunlight. And the size of your container is going to be relative to the plant's growth. I like to use bigger containers. I think they have more of a pow when all put together, and it allows us to start with more established plants and to see the wonderful effects of cascading and whatnot. So one word of caution, avoid toxins because you don't want to have something permeate into the root system of your plant. So stay away from like paint cans or anything that might have had chemicals as a container. But other than that, anything goes. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the tips that I like to pass along is to use a plastic pot as a liner for a decorative container. And my reason is simple. I'm not really strong, and I like containers, and I have a lot of them. But I also have some beautiful containers that are very, very heavy, and I don't like to move them. So by using a plastic pot, I can bring the pots to my planting area where all my flowers are, where my soil is, where everything is that I need to plant something, and then I can move it to the decorative container. It also insulates against drying out because the soil won't wick as quickly it doesn't wick at all into plastic like it does in a terracotta container or a cement container. So a plastic pot to me makes a lot of sense because I can just bring it to my potting area rather than having to bring the potting area to every single container. And then the fun side starts selecting your plants. You're going to choose nice color combinations, and you're also going to want to choose plants that have a vertical, horizontal, and cascading growth effect. And we're going to get into the recipe for that in a little bit. But this is just actually, this is a personal picture of mine from a trip to a nursery in early spring one year. So I'm a really happy person here because I'm ready, set, and all set to go making containers. And if you're using a large container and buying smaller pots, like 4 or 6 inch ones, you'll want to plant in multiples to get that growth effect as quickly as possible. Remember, containers don't have the ability
David, are you gonna let her know she froze?
Yeah, we seem to have frozen here.
Oh, I think she looks like she's moving her eyes. I can put something in the chat too. Bear with us, you guys.
Yeah, hold on, everybody. Hopefully we'll get her back.
Yeah, I think
Okay, I took my camera.
okay, talk again, Denise. Denise, are you there?
Uh-oh, I wonder what the heck happened with that.
Hello.
Hi, there you are.
Okay, says I'm.
Can't hear you again, Denise. Oh,
That's unfortunate.
yeah. I think she's got some unstable internet going on. She said,
Yeah.
oh, there she is.
Okay, I'll talk quick.
Okay, keep going.
Huh. All right, I don't know. Oh, there you are. And Denise, you plugged yourself in, right? You're not using Wi-Fi.
Well, the picture's moving.
I know. Right, that's crazy that that can go, but her voice can't, you would think. Well, this is the first time for this. There's 43 people too.
I know, we were having a good roll there. Well, everybody, I'm sorry that we're having problems. It's a connection on Denise's end, so there's really not much we can do, I don't think. Let's hold on another minute or two and see if it clears up again.
Right, because she's taking down her camera. I'm trying to think of all the things I know. Take down your camera, work off, direct, not through Wi-Fi.
Well, I guess technology is not foolproof, right?
Right.
Right,
She's on for a second and then it just goes off again.
right. So I would think that it's, definitely the instability on her end.
And I do. I have a direct line into the computer.
We can hear you right now. So, David, Denise asked in the chat box if you wanted to take over, but then I guess you're just reading the slides.
Yeah, we'd be just reading the slides.
I what if we Denise like recorded herself doing it and then we put it on YouTube?
Well, it would be, maybe that's what we're gonna have to do because I think unfortunately, this is not gonna work today. So I don't know. I don't think, it looks like it's not gonna work. So,
Can you hear me?
Yes. I have one other idea, but it's to try to like use your phone as a hotspot, but then you're using that's the only other thing I can think of.
Oh, I can.
Bear with us, you guys. We'll give us one more attempt here, and if we can't get
And my Bluetooth is off. I'll turn my Bluetooth on.
it.
And I'll go to Wi-Fi and I'll ask to join hotspot. It's automatic.
And isn't it funny? Now we can hear absolutely perfect when she's trying to hook up her Wi-Fi.
That's crazy.
yeah, now she's back on.
Huh.
You're just as clear as.
All right, I'm going to keep talking. I hear you when you tell me I'm muted, and so if we get stuck again, That's what we'll do. I will record it and we can alert all of these wonderful people that are so patiently waiting because I know they want to make their containers and they want this information. We can get it out. I can do that for you today, so you'll have it this afternoon. So carrying on, I want to talk about the recipe for thrillers, fillers, and spillers. And as tongue-tied as you can get doing this, it is such an easy recipe for making your containers. It consists of structure of your container, texture that you put against one another, and you need to choose plants that have similar growth requirements, and you also want to choose color that is very, very workable with the other plants that are in your arrangement. So let's start by talking about thrillers. Your thriller is usually a vertical plant or something that grows vertical. It could also be a decorative element like a small obelisk or it's some sort of wind effect thing. But normally we like to choose a something that grows. So between flowers and grasses and banana plants and elephant ears and canna, you've got lots of vertical choices to choose from. But that's going to usually be considered the star of your container. That is the real visual because it hits everybody right in the eye. Absolutely gorgeous. You want to plant your thriller in the center of your container if your container is seen from all sides. If it's going to only be seen from one side, you could plant your thriller right in the back of the pot. It actually is easier to plant if you're not centering and ringing, but most of the time that's what I'm doing is centering and ringing. And as I mentioned, foliage, grasses, whatnot. What you're seeing here is Angelona. And I've just grayed out. Actually, Proven Winners did that for me. The other flowers that they selected in this recipe. Fillers is the next group. Your filler is anything that spreads out in mounds to make your container look fuller. You're going to plant that midway between the container edge and thriller plant. Sometimes your container isn't large enough to get 3 different layers. So you can also interplant them with your spiller plants. And I ask you to forgive me if I do get my tongue tied. Anyway, they can, as you plant them and as they grow, you can weave your flowers through the container so that you'll get that nice rounded look. And here you can see that petunias were used for the filler in this arrangement. But you can use other things. I've mentioned here impatiens and salvia. Oops, I went the wrong direction. How come? How come? I don't know why I'm going backwards. Okay, spiller. Your spiller plants are those that cascade over the pot. They are planted on the inner edge of your container, so it could be anything that grows in like a vine-like formation. Sweet potato vines are wonderful for that. Dichondra, licorice plant. There's other. These are the ones that I mentioned are all green plants, but there's also a wonderful variety of flowering plants that you can use for spillers as well. So you can see the construction here. I've walked you through the thriller, the filler, and the spiller. Oops, I'm going backwards again. I don't know why it's doing that, guys. I really don't know. I'm clicking the same thing.
We just have too many bugs today.
I am just so sorry. I really don't know. Well, David, as I
There
said,
you go.
kind of a rookie these days with Zoom because we don't do it as much anymore. I wanted to give you some ideas for flowers that you can plant in your garden. Here are some perennial favorites that work very well. I think I mentioned earlier, planting invasive plants in containers. On the upper left, you will see that chameleon plant. It's beautiful with the colorations and everything, but you do not want it in the ground where it can scramble around the other plants that you have nearby because it could choke out the other growth. But putting in a container, you're getting 3 months of growth. Other plants can grow with it as well, but you'll stop that invasive habit that they tend to have. Purple coneflowers, also known as echinacea. There's a lot of variety of those, but that's a perennial favorite for containers, as well as irises, transcantia, also known as spiderwort, yarrow, which comes in yellows and whites and reds and pinks. And then you also have your heucheras, or commonly known as coral bells, but they become so exciting with all the different cultivars that they have invented. And the leaves have become more striking than the flowers that they produce. Here I go again. I just don't get that. Uh, okay, I'll use this. Okay, annuals. Annuals are extremely popular for containers, and the reason for that is because they are in bloom all season long. Unlike perennials that have a specific blooming period, they are here today and gone tomorrow, and you have to rely on the beauty of their leaves and other structures of the plant. Annuals tend to be in bloom for the entire season. Here in the upper left, you see verbena. Verbena also comes in a lot of different colors. You see the osteoporum, the African daisy, petunias, of course. There's a rainbow of colors for petunias and styles and taste, and some mound, some spill, some thrill. So have fun picking your petunias. And then salvia. Salvia is great, and it also is great as a thriller plant because they tend to be very tall. Hummingbird magnet as well. So if you like to attract hummingbirds, you might want to plant some salvia in your containers. And then lantana. Lantana is actually in the verbena family, but it has these beautiful colored markings that just change daily. You know, it could be more yellow one day and coral the next day, or then a mixture the next day. And they come in shades of berry and red and yellow and gold. And then there's foliage. Never discount foliage in your gardening, whether it's in your containers or in the ground, because they just add so much. Usually they add a lot of texture. In the upper left, one of my favorite thrillers is the papyrus, also commonly known as king tut, although there's some baby tuts and lady tuts out there these days. But the king tut actually grows up to 4 feet high. And I guess that's why I like it, because I like big, bold containers. In the center, you have your Artemisia, and over to the right, you have asparagus fern. And those can be filled tumbles, or some of them have like a columnar effect to them. You've got your grasses and multiple colors. Some are burgundy, some are pink with green, some are just green, some are black. And then when they flower, they're even more spectacular. And then, of course, elephant ears are always fun to have. And some of them come in multiple colorations as well, with burgundy and their veining and whatnot. I mentioned dichondra the other recently, and not everybody may be familiar with dichondra. It's sort of a bluish green type of leaf, and much smaller in scale than, say, an elephant ear. It's more the size of, say, a violet, and it is a wonderful trailing, very fine vining plant. So some of these greens are used as thrillers, some are used as spillers. Succulents is another type of container that you can plant, and I'll tell you, if you've got succulents or you want to experiment with succulents, growing them in the outdoors during the summer is amazing for all of the colorations that your succulents will take on in the direct full sun. But succulents, not all succulents are hardy in our zone. So these containers are ones that would have to come in during the colder months and be placed in a position where you can provide it with lots of light, because it doesn't need much water or anything like that, but it does need to have a lot of strong sun. Herbs, someone was just recently asking in chat if we were going to be covering herbs in the containers, and yes, we are. I'd love to I love to include herbs in my containers, because again, they're real close by, they're unique, and some of them are just fabulous. I mean, the basils alone, which you see a typical basil in the lower left-hand corner, I've got some seeds started of just basil, and some of them are just coming along beautifully. They've got purple markings in them. Some of them have fragrance, and some of them, even their flowers are incredible. So not only are they delicious and do they smell good, but they also look good. You've got your rosemary, parsley. Some parsley can tumble right over. Of course, your mint, your oregano, and lots of different sages. And you can do vegetables in your containers with or without flowers. That's totally up to you. Last year I had an extra colander, so I planted a colander full of lettuce and kept that right out on my deck. And it was wonderful to go out and cut fresh lettuce. I mean, just in a small size. It's just my husband and I. And all I did is line the colander with weed cloth and then put my soil in and planted it. It had drainage. It was wonderful. I'm doing it again. Here you can see some zucchinis and some eggplants growing in a container. Again, if you've got a small space and you don't have room for a large garden, then you can plant them in containers to grow vertically. Vegetables are fresh and convenient, and basically you can grow anything in a container. And I've listed a lot of them. I'm not going to read them off to you. One of the things that I've really recently fallen in love with is potatoes, though, because potatoes, before they're ready to harvest, create such a beautiful green mound with beautiful pinkish flowers, and it's really, really pretty. And because the container is large, you get a wow effect with that. So have fun trying and testing the waters and planting some vegetables in your containers nearby. So let's talk about getting your container ready, planting it up, what you actually will need to do this. For starters, you need to go to the garden center and grab your plants. When you're shopping, consider your colors, run through your mind, thriller, filler, and spiller. Thriller, filler, and spiller. If you just look for those key parts for your plants, you will be able to create some wonderful containers. And just keep in mind, if you're buying smaller plants, maybe because the price point is better, you are going to have to use more. So just bear that in mind. Other materials you'll need your gravel or pot chars or even netting. I love to use those little shower net balls after they've given out, because they're so easy to rip apart and just throw at the bottom of a container to cover the drainage holes. And I also use pistachio shells. I mean, anything that will serve as a definition against the soil serves to cover your drainage holes in the bottom. You'll need soil, of course. You can make your own with a recipe of 1 part peat moss, 1 part perlite, 1 part compost, and 1 part good garden soil, or you could buy commercially made potting soil. I tend to like the pro mixes because I can get a big bag or 2 or 3. Some years are like that. But it gives me lots of fluffy soil to work with in my containers. And then you can add slowly release fertilizer like Osmocote if you prefer. Fertilizing is going to be a big part of your regular maintenance. So consider that so that there's always a baseline of furniture or fertilizer. And then, of course, your plants. So let's get started. First, you're going to add your material that you've chosen for drainage to the bottom of your container. And then you're going to, if you're using slow release fertilizer, you're going to add that to your soil. And then you're going to fill your container with that soil. Now, do not use, if you can avoid it, dry soil, because it will be very hard to wet the soil for the plants, and it might create too many air pockets as you go along. So I always make sure that my soil is wet before I use it. If I'm using Pro Mix, which always comes dry, I always just spray that with the hose before I get started. And if I'm not doing that, then I would just do it in a smaller container with my commercial mix and just make sure it's moist. Insert your plants. Sometimes you have to scoop out a little soil to make room for your plants, but put them in the arrangement we talked about. And then, if you'd like, you can top your container with mulch or small pebbles or moss, something that is going to help retain the moisture for your plant and also create a very pretty looking base. So here you see it, the thriller, the spillers, and the fillers. As you're adding the plants, we talked about you place that thriller plant in the center or in the back. Then you add your filler plants around or in front of that star. Then you finish with your spiller plants. Pack them in, pack in all your little plants, and then fill the soil to the top of the root balls. I
I think we lost you again, Denise.
talk,
Well, oh,
talking.
okay, keep
Okay.
going. Oh, now she's gone again.
The craziest thing.
It is the craziest thing.
I guess that's why they call it unstable.
Well, it's another intermission.
Uh,
Oh, there she is. I hear her laughing. Denise, you there?
We were on a good roll there.
I know.
She'll come back in a minute, I bet you.
Well, you want me to sing a song?
I see talking. I see David.
Oh, there you go, Denise. Denise, did you try the Wi-Fi on your phone to try to use your phone as a like the Bluetooth?
I
There you are. Keep talking. Special guest comes with technical difficulties.
join.
Oh, there you are.
It just keeps cutting in and out.
Right. It's windy out.
Personal hotspot, mini queen. Look very strong either.
We can hear you. Can you hear us, Denise? Are you there? I knew I should have practiced some jokes.
Marcy,
Yeah.
the woman on
Well, we could talk through the rest of this. Here she's showing some basic requirements. And a lot of your container plants are going to want at least 6 hours of sun per day. We just had a few questions here at Cooperative Extension about roses that didn't bloom and lawns didn't grow well. And a lot of it comes down to the sun, because when you don't have enough sun, a lot of plants don't do very well. So unless you're planting a shade specific container, I think one of the things you want to make sure is you have a lot of sunlight. You want to have a rich soil because your peat moss and perlite mixture doesn't have a lot of nutrients to it, so you're going to need fertilizer. And I would say you would like to use either some quick release fertilizer like a Miracle Grow every couple weeks, or maybe you would use an Osmocote type material, a slow release fertilizer. But either way, have a fertilizer plan, because you're going to need to feed these plants, which are packed into your container, and they're going to really want to have a lot of nutrition. And drainage, of course, which Denise talked about, is very important. And watering, sometimes she has twice a day. If you've got small containers, they're going to need more water. If you have a bigger container, not as much. But I like to water my containers or check them every day, especially during the hot weather. Grooming your containers. Lots of plants need a little grooming or attention here and there. We've got a rose that certainly needs to be deadheaded as those flowers age. We've got a daisy there that benefits from deadheading. And the more you groom your plants, the better your plants look. Especially with things like roses and some of these plants that are higher maintenance. You're going to need to take off the dead leaves. You're going to need to remove the dead blossoms. I like to grow big elephant ears in containers like Denise has already shown, and they grow really well if I keep them very well watered and very well fertilized. But as they age, they have a yellow leaf here and a yellow leaf there. So we need to remove those and trim them up. And probably at least once a week, you want to go through and look at your containers and really do a little bit of maintenance. It doesn't take long because they're so easy to work with, but just keep up with it and they'll really benefit from that. How about displaying your containers? I'm sure Denise has some good pictures here. We have groupings, maybe not one container plopped somewhere, but if you have a large container with several smaller ones around, the picture here is great because I really like that small blue container in front of the larger one. Vary your heights. You might use bricks for some of these to hold them up discreetly, maybe in the background if you want something higher. But it makes a better picture to have more variety of shapes and colors and textures. And of course the heights, because that's one of the things you can really play with here. Color groupings. This looks interesting. She's got all of one color grouping here. A yellow theme. Maybe you could have a pink theme, a yellow theme, a red theme, whatever your color of the year is maybe, or whatever color you personally happen to like in your garden. And again, the scale here is varying with the different size pots, but the color, that yellow, is carrying that theme through. So that's kind of a fun play on color there. And you've got a yellowy grass with the yellowy flowers, which again is different forms and different textures. A POW accent. Now that is certainly a POW of a picture there. You've got an antique garden urn that's really incredibly planted. Now that would be, to my mind, a very high maintenance container. I would think you'd really want to water that every day or certainly check it every day. But it's elevated, it's very attention getting. It's really one of those things that knocks you in the eye. You've got a lot of plants packed in there, so they are going to need maintenance. They are going to need fertilizer. But just think about what an impact that would have on your garden. That would be the neighborhood conversation piece, I'm sure. And you can use these singly or in pairs, or maybe as a focal point or a stopping point as people walk through your garden. It's a real eye catcher. Here's a good example of repetition. Now here you've got a building with uniform windows, uniform window treatments, and then you've got sort of uniform plantings. They don't all have to be exactly the same because they're going to grow each one a little bit differently, but you've got the same plant types in each one and the same colors. So that adds to this idea of uniformity, and it makes sort of a soothing picture rather than a lot of chaos. It's more of a unified look or a tailored look, I guess I would say. How about fences and gates? You can get really creative. I know Denise talked about a lot of hardware that's available now, hanging containers on fences and gates. Certainly you can fill bare spots with color. Maybe you have a sort of a monotonous looking stockade fence that really needs a pick-me-up, or you could camouflage unsightly views. Certainly, a container can really be an eye catcher and maybe train the eye away from something that doesn't look so good. In fact, a trick for when you're on a garden tour or when people are coming over is if you have a bare spot in your garden that doesn't look so good, or maybe something's out of bloom or diseased, or you had to pull out a plant, you plop a container there, and that container really fills in that gap and takes over. And that's one of the great things about containers is that they're portable, right? So just imagine all the things that you can do. Now, I was at a garden center yesterday on some cooperative extension business, and people were coming in and out. It was a beautiful sunny day. And you go into the garden center and you just get overwhelmed with all the choices and all the different things that are on offer. But I think if you stick with the thriller, spiller, and filler idea that Denise has presented, you'll really have some basis on how to fill up your containers. And here again, just some ideas. I really like the coleus in the picture on the left. It's one of my favorite plants for containers, and there's lots of different coleus now with purple, pink, green, yellow, orange. I mean, unusual colors. They're extremely easy to grow. They really do a great job in a container, and you've got some sedum underneath of that, and that's a very textural kind of container. And then on the other side, you've got more of a, I'm not even sure what that plant is, but it's a very bright, eye-catching yellow color in front of those succulents. You can have trees in containers. They can stay in containers for a number of years. What you don't want to have happen is have a tree in a container and have a lot of freezing and thawing. Now, years ago, we probably couldn't get away with that in this climate, but now that our winters aren't quite so bad, you may experiment a little bit more with this. We've got a Japanese maple in a container, and that one almost you wouldn't want to fill that up with other plants. I think that's making kind of a singular statement with the beauty of that tree and the color of the leaves and the shape and the form. And then we've got, it looks to me like arborvitae or maybe false cypress. And again, that's sort of a formal look, having several of those in a row, giving a very kind of uniform look to it. Also shrubs, you can experiment with other plants. We tend to think of perennials and annuals mostly, but if you have a favorite house plant, it might work in a container. If you have a favorite shrub, nothing says sort of classiness, I guess, better than a large terracotta pot with a boxwood in it. I mean, that's an old form of gardening, and you would see that in the great European gardens in France and England. You can replicate that look if you want to do that sort of a thing. Or the looks to me like a juniper maybe there, much more informal, kind of a shaggy look. And then again, dramatic settings here. The lovely brick wall, which has been painted, and you've got this large container with an artichoke plant in it. That's the big spiky plant in the background. And then your filler and your spiller. The spiller there looks like that dichondra that Denise talked about, which is a great spiller plant. And then on the other side, again, wild combinations really, because in nature these plants would never grow together. You've got a papyrus plant, the green sort of airy looking fine plant, and then you've got, to me it looks like alyssum, the white flowering plant filling out underneath. And again, very dramatic different plants, but they can grow well in that container, which you're taking good care of all summer long. Fall plantings. You can change out your containers if they get a little tired, maybe by September. There's lots of wonderful fall kinds of plants that come around, and my wife isn't into gardening at all, but she loves doing fall things. So we go out and we get pumpkins, we get mums, we get some of these flowering kales, these flowering cabbages, compact mini ornamental millet grasses, and she has a lot of fun putting those together. And this is just a white urn which is very sort of formal, and then those cabbages and kales, which I really like. Of course, that is going to only last a few weeks, but if you're having an event maybe, that would be something really fun to put together. Oops, and now our picture's not moving. Well, there we go. Pull up a chair. We've had some master gardeners in the past that have been interested in making a garden from a chair. And it looks to me like we've got on the left-hand side a casual chair that maybe isn't good enough to use in the house anymore. But what says country side more than a big old container, maybe one of those sort of semi-rusty galvanized containers with a classic red geranium in it. Back when I was a kid, the classic red geraniums were everywhere. I remember we had them at my house, we had them at my grandparents' house. And really, I don't think they've ever gone out of style because they're just so colorful. And of course, those florist geraniums like that come in very bright pinks and very bright whites and lavenders, all sorts of colors nowadays. And then the other picture there, the seat has been removed from that old wooden chair, which is a very lovely shape. And the seat's been replaced by a container of some sort, and I'm not quite sure how that was made. Whether that's just a sphagnum container, I would think it might have a plastic container because otherwise, without a liner or something, that's going to dry out quite a bit. But don't throw out that old chair. Maybe it can be repurposed, and it doesn't mean you have to have it forever. Or maybe you can find one at the curb and use it for a season or two and have some fun with it. Succulents. I know Denise is a specialist with succulents. They're extremely attractive because they have so many different shades of these pinks and greens and blues and silvers. They're sort of pastel. They're not as bright unless they're in flower, but look at the different shapes you've got there, as well as the different colors, all sort of in that pale family. And to me, that looks like it was a tiered fountain at one point that somebody's turned into a succulent tower, which would be really quite fantastic. And a lot of those plants could be taken in for the winter if they weren't hardy and preserved and then reused the following season. And it doesn't have to be large. There's a soup ladle, a picture of a soup ladle with a succulent garden in it. And as she says here, they're easy to care for, easy to propagate. You can keep these going over the winter if you like. And they're going to be drought tolerant. You're not going to really need to water these maybe every day. Although you have to keep an eye on them. They're not going to be, drought proof by any means. And of course, you're really going to want to have good drainage for these guys too, because one thing a succulent is not going to like is poor drainage. Again, lots of colors here. Some of the garden centers and the home centers I know start to sell these this time of the year, and they're a lot of fun to put together. This is one of those ones where it gets your creative juices going. You're not necessarily having a thriller, spiller, and filler here, I don't think, but you're really playing more with the colors and the textures and letting those really do the work. Again, shapes and colors, a large urn there with the thriller and the spiller and the filler. I really like that one. I don't remember what that name of that purple plant is, but I've actually grown that myself. I should remember that. And then the other one on the left-hand side, again, that looks like your coleus on the top there. Really filling out and filling in. And again, this really points out to me that you get a season worth of growth here. You're going to plant these in May. You're going to have May, June, July, August, September, and probably into October, you're really going to be able to enjoy these containers. So, sometimes people go, oh, I don't want to grow annuals. You have to replant them. They're too much work. But really, once you plant these containers up, that's the work, or to me, the fun part. And then you're really just doing a little maintenance, and they go for so long, and they really provide so much value. Window boxes, I've never really done window boxes, but one of the considerations I would think for a window box would be that you would have to have access to that window box to water it. So unless you can really open your windows and get water out there, or maybe you have a very long watering wand. I've seen people have those, um, and you can reach the window box. That's really the main thing. Have access to the water because these are going to dry out probably every day and really need that constant maintenance. So they can be very, very attractive. There's a lot of different types of hardware out there nowadays to construct these. And again, she's got fillers and spillers and thrillers. Here's a fan flower, a bacopa, which is the little vine, a sweet potato vine, which is that bright green, limey colored plant in the middle. That's a great spiller plant. And the million bells, which I believe are the orange flowers in that container. Vertical gardening, yeah, because you're having those long spillers in this picture, you're really creating a wall of color there, which is really very impressive. There's caladium in there. The caladium is the pink and the green leaf up towards the top. Then it looks to me like, it almost looks like coleus, but I don't think that purple is coleus. I'm not quite sure what that is. And then the thrilling or the spilling of the sweet potato vine going all the way down to the ground. So these things do get big. They really do get big. Here's a specialty container where they've planted tulips, grape hyacinths, and they've let those come up. And then they've added in there later on, I would think, those pink pansies. So that would be really something that would have been done now. You'd have to plan ahead to do that type of a container, and those bulbs would need that cold treatment in order to bloom. Here's a little schematic of that. Planting these bulbs, the bigger bulbs are going to go deeper, the smaller bulbs are going to go a little more shallowly. And then we're going to try to get them to come into bloom at the same time because we have tulips that bloom late, bloom early, and bloom mid-season. So we want to coordinate when they bloom together. And then we could add in those annuals or the herbs as we needed to in the spring. Here's another display, Dracaena, which is the spiky plant kind of in the background, and then again a very large coleus with that sort of very bright pink leaf to it, and then the flowing down of the dichondra. Okay, another foliage container in there. To me, it looks like, yes, well, they're calling this what? A dichondra, the filler or the spiller there, the creeping jenny, Tridescantia carex, which is the spiky plant, and then the sweet potato vine. So that's another good one with a lot of different contrasts in the form and the shape of the foliage. And then if you've got a bigger container and enough size, you can really go big. And Denise was talking about the king tut papyrus, which is that big plant in that picture there. That's a really incredible plant. Um, and you can buy the king tut. I've grown the king tut in my big containers. And then there's the baby tut, which is a smaller papyrus. Again, that likes a lot of moisture and it takes up a fair amount of space, but boy, it really grows very well in the season. The other tall plant in that container looks like the fennel, which is getting very large. And then the sweet potato vine and the larger or the smaller petunia down the bottom. Tip, keep nursery tags in the soil so you remember what you've got, right? And here is Liberace's piano, I guess we could say, turned into a fountain. It really is the old saying of let your imagination be your guide because here you can create almost anything and make it into a container. Using containers as a natural screen. Maybe you have a view you don't like so much during the summertime. Maybe you need some privacy if you're gardening on a balcony or something like that. Well, here we've got some ornamental grasses growing in containers. What could be easier than that? And they're going to blow in the wind and shift with the sunlight and be quite attractive, really. And that would be a very easy way to provide some screening and maybe some protection from wind if you're on a windy terrace or a windy patio. Let it go to your head. Well, you can find all sorts of interesting things in the gardening world. And one of the fun things about this time of the year is going, visiting garden centers and visiting nurseries. And usually I take one day sometime in May. I take the day off. I take a vacation day. I get in my car and I go in a direction. I maybe go over to Massachusetts. I stay here in the Capital District. I go up north. And I go hit as many garden centers and nurseries as I can. And when you go out to these places, you're going to see very interesting things, hopefully, and some interesting containers you're going to find, interesting new novel things. And, I've never seen anything quite like this, but you never know what you're going to find. And that's part of the exciting parts of gardening. So again, fill up your patios and your porches. I like to put containers on the back steps of my house. I have some steps that look a little bit like that one in the picture there, where I can put containers along those steps. And again, that provides this long season of color that I have. And if a container doesn't look so good, I can switch it out. And part of the fun there is, again, the shapes of the containers themselves. And they've really got a theme going on there with sort of the pink and the blue colors. And then the porch there, that looks like a lot of plants on that porch. I'm not all sure they're going to survive quite in that deep shady porch, but you've got a hydrangea there as well as some of the other plants. And if you're a plantaholic, you're going to go to the nursery and come home with a few things you don't know where they go. And I always end up with a few extras and I make more containers than I thought I was going to make. But that's again part of the fun. Don't wait for someone to bring you flowers. Plant your own and decorate your soul. Now, I know Denise would have some wonderful words of wisdom here. She's a lot more poetic than I am. So I can't really replicate what I think she might be saying here. But just take a look at this lovely scene. You've got a table and chairs. You've got color coordination here. You've got these limey greens and yellows and a little splash of orange and a little splash of yellow. I'm one of those people that I would put every color together and make it look like a circus. But here I really like this picture personally because they've used some restraint and they've gone with this sort of theme of the limey green and the orange and the yellow, which is really quite effective. But the containers are doing a lot of the work, right? You've got these maybe million bells in the front there. You've got another foliage plant, maybe a coleus, and then a larger container in the background. So you don't need a whole lot sometimes, but if you sometimes use more of a theme to your creation, it can be very, very powerful. 3 = wow. And again, I think the lesson of today was the thriller, which is the tall plant, the filler, which is kind of the medium level, and then that spiller we're going down into the bottom. And you really need a container that is going to be big enough so that you can do all that. Denise has got a picture of herself there, and on the left-hand side, she's got the papyrus, which again is one of our favorites, as well as the banana plant. So a lot of fun there. And remember your fertilizer, your full sun, and your watering. So I think we got through with some of the messages that Denise maybe would like to give you. If anybody has any questions,